We've seen him on our screens for years. Sumit Singh, the man from India who captured the heart of Jenny Slatten and the deep, unrelenting skepticism of audiences worldwide. We've watched him navigate family drama, cultural clashes, and a secret marriage, all in the name of love. We've seen him cook, we've seen him clean, and we've seen him try to find his footing. Now, with his television career in what some insiders are calling a precarious state, Sumit appears to have rebranded himself. He is no longer just a reality TV star. He has emerged seemingly overnight as a spiritual guide, a guru for lost Westerners seeking enlightenment in the heart of India. But an investigation by sources close to the story reveals a deeply unsettling picture. They claim he's not selling enlightenment. He's selling the same old lies, repackaged in saffron-colored robes. This isn't a new chapter, it's just a new con. What you are about to hear is a story of calculated deception, emotional manipulation, and the cynical exploitation of a sacred tradition. If what our sources are reporting is true, then this is Sumit's most dangerous scam yet. Before we dive into the dark underbelly of this new spiritual enterprise, please take a moment. If you find this content compelling and want to see more deep dives that the mainstream won't touch, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell. Your support allows us to bring these exclusive theories to light. Don't let the algorithm hide the truth. To understand the present, we must first examine the past. The story of Sumit Singh has never been a straightforward one. From the very beginning, his narrative was built on a foundation of deception. Remember Michael Jones, the charming, muscular Chicago-based model whose pictures Sumit used to catfish Jenny online for over a year? While he eventually came clean and used his own photos, that initial fundamental act of misrepresentation set the tone for everything that followed. It was a deception by design. It wasn't a mistake. It was a strategy. This wasn't a simple case of being shy or insecure. This was the construction of an entirely false reality to ensnare someone's emotions from thousands of miles away. It speaks to a certain mindset, a comfort with duplicity, a willingness to wear a mask if it achieves a desired outcome. This wasn't a youthful indiscretion. It was the blueprint. Then came the bombshell that defined his entire journey on 90 Day Fiancé, The Secret Wife. For years, he allowed Jenny to believe he was a single man, ready and willing to marry her. He let her leave her life in America, sell her belongings, and move to India based on this lie. He lived a double life, placating his parents and his wife in one world while promising eternal love to Jenny in another. The sheer audacity of this deception is breathtaking. It required constant management, a web of lies told to everyone he knew. He wasn't just lying to Jenny, he was lying to his wife, his parents, his in-laws, and his friends. This is not the behavior of a man who simply made a mistake. This is the work of a skilled manipulator, someone who can compartmentalize their life and their lies with chilling efficiency. The emotional devastation this caused Jenny was broadcast for the world to see. The humiliation, the heartbreak, the feeling of being made a fool of. And yet, he always had an excuse. It was his parents' fault. It was the culture. It was the pressure. The responsibility was always deflected. The blame always shifted. He mastered the art of playing the victim in a crisis of his own making, a skill that would become his trademark. Let's also consider the financial aspect, which has always been a shadowy undercurrent in their story. Jenny arrived in India with her life savings, a finite resource that has been a constant source of anxiety. Sumit's ability to earn a living has been, to put it mildly, inconsistent. His parents' disapproval directly impacted his financial and social standing. The income from the television show, while significant, is not eternal. As their storyline became more repetitive, the same arguments with his parents, the same circular conversations about their future, their airtime, and by extension their paychecks, would inevitably diminish. A sense of desperation was palpable. What happens when the TLC money dries up? What is Sumit's marketable skill beyond being Sumit from 90 Day Fiancé? This is the critical question. He has no conventional career to fall back on that would support the lifestyle he and Jenny have become accustomed to. The pressure to find a new revenue stream must have been immense. And what is the one asset he possesses? A degree of fame, an association with the East meets West narrative, and a persona that, to a certain type of Westerner, seems authentically Indian. He didn't need to learn a new trade, he just needed to monetize the character he had already built. And so, the transformation began. Slowly, then all at once, his social media presence started to shift. The casual snapshots with Jenny were interspersed with more curated content, Photos of him in meditative poses, often with a carefully chosen scenic backdrop. Videos of him explaining the very basics of yoga, not as a practitioner, but as a teacher. He began quoting Hindu scriptures, offering bite-sized philosophical nuggets perfect for an Instagram caption. He talked of chakras, of karma, of the search for inner peace. It was a masterclass in rebranding. He was leveraging his Indian heritage, not as a part of his identity, but as a product to be sold. He was positioning himself as a bridge for Westerners, a friendly, familiar face from television who could unlock the mystical secrets of the East for them. The target audience was clear: tourists, spiritual seekers, and 90-Day Fiancé fans who were looking for something more than just reality TV drama. They were looking for meaning, and Sumit was positioning himself to sell it to them. This brings us to the core of our investigation, an insider report that paints a disturbing picture of this new enterprise. A freelance journalist, let's call her Sarah, has been investigating the rise of pseudo-spiritual scams targeting Western tourists in India. Sumit's sudden pivot to guru set off alarm bells. His history of deception made him a prime subject for a deeper look. Sarah decided to go undercover. She created a plausible backstory. She was Ashley, a recently divorced woman from California, feeling lost and adrift on a spiritual pilgrimage to India to find herself. It's a cliché, but it's a cliché that works precisely because it's so common. It's the perfect camouflage. She reached out through a contact form on a rudimentary website that had been quietly launched, a site filled with stock photos of sunsets and lotus flowers, and of course, smiling pictures of Sumit. The website offered personalized spiritual counseling sessions, promising ancient wisdom tailored to modern problems. The correspondence itself was the first red flag. The replies were vague and used overly spiritual language that felt canned and impersonal. When Ashley requested a session, the instructions were specific and unusual. There was no formal booking system, no credit card payment option. The instructions, which our source has reviewed, stated that the meeting would take place at a discreet rented office space, not an ashram or a recognized wellness center, and the payment, a significant sum of several hundred US dollars, was to be made in cash, in untraceable, undeclared cash. The reason given was to maintain the purity of the energetic exchange and avoid the transactional nature of modern commerce. This is classic scammer terminology, wrapping a demand for untraceable cash in a veneer of spiritual superiority. The day of the session arrived. The location was a small, sterile room in a nondescript office building, far from the tourist-filled spiritual centers of Rishikesh or Varanasi. The room was sparsely decorated. A few yoga mats were rolled up in a corner, and a cheap print of the Om symbol hung crookedly on the wall. The air was thick with the smell of cheap incense. It felt less like a sacred space and more like a temporary rental, a place that could be vacated at a moment's notice. Sumit entered, not in traditional holy robes, but in a simple, clean kurta pajama. He was calm, smiling, and exuded the gentle, non-threatening persona that fans of the show would recognize. The performance, for that is what it was, had begun. Ashley began to tell her story, a fabricated but emotionally resonant tale of betrayal and heartbreak. She was vulnerable. She was searching for answers, for a path forward. Sumit listened patiently, nodding at all the right moments, his face a mask of serene empathy. This is where the true nature of the operation revealed itself. The advice he began to offer was a stream of generic fortune cookie platitudes. He spoke of letting go of attachments, of the universe having a plan, of the need to forgive not for the other person, but for oneself. It was nothing you couldn't find on the first page of a Google search for how to get over a breakup. The session was being secretly recorded, and a later analysis of the transcript was damning. Word-for-word phrases were lifted from popular American wellness blogs and self-help influencers. He was literally regurgitating advice from the very Western culture his clients were trying to escape and selling it back to them as ancient Indian wisdom. He then tried to add a layer of exotic authenticity by inventing what he called ancient proverbs. At one point, he looked Ashley deep in the eyes and said with profound seriousness, "The tree that bends in the storm is the one that survives. Your heart must be like bamboo." While it sounds vaguely wise, this proverb has no known source in Hindu scripture or Indian folklore. It's a mishmash of Western pop psychology and stereotypical Eastern imagery. Another gem he offered was, "To see the reflection in the pond, the water must be still. You must still have the waters of your mind." Again, it's a lovely image, but it's a content-free statement. It offers no practical guidance, no actual technique, no genuine insight. It's the spiritual equivalent of a blank page. He was a mimic, an actor playing the part of a guru, reading from a script he'd cobbled together from the internet. The session took an even more cynical turn when Sumit began to weave his own story into the counseling. He subtly reframed his own history of deceit as a spiritual journey. His catfishing of Jenny was a lesson in the illusion of physical form. His secret marriage was a karmic debt he had to repay. His struggles with his parents were a test of his devotion and detachment from worldly expectations. In his telling, he was not a deceiver. He was a martyr, a soul who had weathered immense spiritual trials. This served a dual purpose. It not only reinforced his own narrative of victimhood, but it also created a false sense of intimacy and shared struggle with his client. He was saying that, yeah, I understand your pain because I have suffered too. It was a deeply manipulative tactic designed to build a bond based on a completely distorted version of his own past. Throughout the hour-long session, Ashley pressed for specific, actionable advice. How does one still the waters of the mind? What are the practical steps to let go of attachment? Every time Sumit would deflect. He would respond with another vague aphorism, or he would simply say that the answers were already within her and that his role was merely to help her see them. This is a common tactic among spiritual charlatans. By placing the onus of discovery entirely on the client, they absolve themselves of any responsibility to provide actual help. If the client doesn't get better, it's not because the advice was useless. It's because the client didn't try hard enough to find the answers within themselves. It's a perfect blame-proof system. The session concluded. Sumit smiled his gentle smile and said that her healing journey had begun. Then came the most crucial part of the interaction: the payment. The moment was, according to the report, deeply awkward. The pretense of spiritual connection evaporated, replaced by a crass business transaction. The energetic exchange we discussed, he said, avoiding the word money. He indicated a small wooden box on a table. You can place the offering there. He made a point of turning his back, as if to grant her privacy, a gesture that seemed more designed to feign disinterest in the money than to offer genuine respect. He insisted there would be no receipt. The universe keeps its own records, he allegedly quipped. He wanted untraceable cash, ensuring there was no paper trail, no proof of service rendered, no way for a dissatisfied customer to seek a refund or report him to any authority. This was not the behavior of a spiritual guide. It was the methodology of a back alley deal. The undercover operation was a success. The secret recordings and Sarah's detailed notes provided a damning portrait of a spiritual charlatan at work. They had him on tape delivering plagiarized advice, inventing fake proverbs, and demanding untraceable cash payments. But the investigation was about to uncover something even more disturbing. The story wasn't just about generic, unhelpful advice. It was about advice that was actively harmful. As Sarah began to network with other foreigners and expats, a name kept coming up in hushed tones: Sumit. It turned out Ashley was not his only client. And the story of one former client, a woman we will call Deborah, reveals the truly dangerous nature of Sumit's new career. Deborah is a 65-year-old widow from Florida. Her husband of 40 years had passed away a year prior, and in her grief, she decided to take a trip to India, a place he had always wanted to visit. She was a casual fan of 90 Day Fiancé and felt a certain sympathy for Sumit and Jenny's story. When she heard through the grapevine that Sumit was offering spiritual counseling, she thought it was kismet. Here was a familiar face, someone she felt she knew, who could perhaps offer her some comfort and guidance in a foreign land. She was emotionally raw, vulnerable, and looking for answers, the perfect mark for a predator. Her problem was not a simple case of wanderlust or post-divorce blues. It was a deep, painful family conflict. Her 2 adult children were bitterly divided over their father's will. The dispute had turned ugly, with accusations and recriminations tearing the family apart. Deborah was caught in the middle, heartbroken by the loss of her husband and now facing the potential loss of her children as well. She went to Sumit not for platitudes, but for genuine guidance on how to heal her fractured family. She poured her heart out to him, explaining the complex emotional dynamics, the history of sibling rivalry now inflamed by grief and money. She was desperate for a solution. Sumit, according to Deborah's tearful testimony to our source, listened to her story and drew a direct and disastrous parallel to his own life. He told her that his greatest spiritual lesson was learning to achieve peace by cutting out negative energy, even when that energy came from his own parents. He advised her that her attachment to her children, her desire for them to reconcile, was the source of her suffering. He allegedly told her, "You cannot control their karma. Their path is their own. To find your own peace, you must detach. You must be willing to walk away from them to save yourself. True spiritual strength is a solitary journey." He was, in essence, advising a grieving mother to abandon her children in their time of crisis, framing this abandonment not as a failure, but as an act of spiritual enlightenment. He was giving her the exact same advice he had used to justify his own alienation from his family, presenting his personal coping mechanism as a universal spiritual truth. This was not just bad advice, it was catastrophically dangerous. For a woman in a fragile emotional state, this counsel, coming from a supposed guru, was taken as a profound directive. Deborah, believing she was following an enlightened path, did as she was told. She sent her children an email quoting some of Sumit's pseudo-spiritual jargon about karma and detachment, and informed them that she was disengaging from the conflict and from them until they could resolve their negative, energetic entanglement. The result was predictable and devastating. Her children, already at odds, united in their shock and anger at their mother. They saw her email not as an act of spiritual wisdom, but as a cold and cruel abandonment in the wake of their father's death. The family rift, which had been a crack, became a chasm. Her attempts to contact them since have been met with silence. Deborah is now back in Florida, more isolated and heartbroken than ever before. Her family is in ruins, and she is consumed by regret. "He's not a guru," she told our source, her voice breaking. "He's a vulture. He saw my pain, my grief, and my wallet, and he preyed on all three. He uses these beautiful, ancient ideas as a weapon to get what he wants. He validated his own bad life choices by getting me to make them too. He told me to cut off my family, and look what happened when he did that. Look at the misery it caused. He sells that misery as a cure." Her testimony is a chilling indictment. It elevates Sumit's operation from a simple financial scam to a form of profound emotional and psychological malpractice. He isn't just taking people's money, he is taking their hope and their family connections and giving them nothing but ruin in return. The pattern is undeniable. From the very beginning, with the Michael Jones persona, Sumit has shown a willingness to create a false reality to get what he wants. He did it with Jenny, constructing a world where he was a single, available man. He's doing it with his family, framing his defiance as a romantic quest rather than a series of selfish decisions. And now he's doing it on a commercial scale, constructing the persona of a wise guru to exploit the emotionally vulnerable. The product has changed, from a false online identity to a false spiritual one, but the methodology is exactly the same. Identify a need, create a fiction to meet that need, and exploit the trust of the person on the other end. What's perhaps most cynical about this new venture is its appropriation of his own culture for profit. He is taking the rich, complex, and deeply meaningful traditions of Hinduism and yoga, traditions that have offered genuine solace to billions of people for millennia, and he is reducing them to a set of marketable cliches. He is strip mining his own heritage, boiling it down to a few easily digestible phrases and poses that he can sell to unsuspecting foreigners. This is not an act of sharing culture. It is an act of prostituting it. It is a profound disrespect to the very traditions he claims to represent. He is counting on the ignorance of his clients, their inability to distinguish between authentic spiritual guidance and a shallow imitation. He is using the West's romanticized image of India as a cloak for his deception. This alleged scam also represents a deep betrayal of Jenny. For years, she has defended him, stood by him through all the lies and manipulations. She has been his staunchest ally. Is she aware of the nature of this new business? Is she a willing participant? Or is she, once again, another victim of his duplicity? If she is involved, it paints a very dark picture of their relationship, suggesting a partnership in deceit. If she is unaware, it means that even after all these years, Sumit is still capable of living a secret life, hiding his true actions from the person supposedly closest to him. Either possibility is deeply troubling and suggests that the foundation of their entire relationship remains as unstable as it was on day one. Their on-screen narrative was about an Indian man trying to assimilate with a Western woman's expectations. Now it appears he's found a way to reverse that dynamic, monetizing his Indian identity by exploiting the very same East meets West curiosity that made him famous in the first place. It is a story that has come full, cynical circle. The evidence collected by the undercover journalist and the heartbreaking testimony from the former client form a compelling and deeply disturbing case. The man who began his public life with a catfish scam now stands accused of becoming a guru who fishes for souls and their cash. Let's pause and absorb the gravity of what we've just laid out. This isn't just about bad advice or taking a few $100s from a tourist. This is a calculated system of psychological manipulation, built on a foundation of lies that stretches back over a decade. The testimony of Deborah is the key that unlocks the entire puzzle. It shows that Sumit is not just repeating harmless platitudes from the internet. He is actively prescribing his own dysfunctional life strategy as a form of spiritual medicine. He is taking his own history of deception, family alienation, and conflict avoidance and packaging it as enlightenment. He is in effect trying to create disciples who will validate his own life choices by repeating his mistakes. This is the hallmark of a deeply narcissistic individual, one who cannot see the world outside the framework of their own needs and justifications. His advice is a mirror, reflecting his own pathologies back onto his vulnerable clients. To truly understand how he reached this point, we need to perform a psychological autopsy of the character he has presented to the world, connecting the dots from Michael Jones to the so-called Guru Singh. The anatomy of a con artist is remarkably consistent, regardless of the con they are running. It always begins with the creation of a desirable identity. In the beginning, the identity was Michael Jones, a handsome, successful Western man, everything Sumit likely felt he was not. This persona was designed to appeal to Jenny's specific desires, a classic love-bombing tactic to create an intense emotional bond before the truth could ever surface. The goal was to make the emotional connection so strong that when the mask eventually slipped, the victim would be too invested to walk away. And it worked. When the truth about his identity was revealed, Jenny was already too deep in love, or perhaps the illusion of love, to sever the connection. She had invested too much time, too much emotion. The con artist counts on this. They know that human beings hate to admit they've been fooled, and will often cling to the lie rather than face the painful reality of the deception. The second critical component of the con artist's playbook is the sob story, the narrative of victimhood. Once the initial deception is revealed, the con artist can never take full responsibility. To do so would be to admit they are the villain. Instead, they must reframe themselves as the true victim. In Sumit's case, the story was always about the immense pressure from his parents and the constraints of Indian culture. He wasn't a liar. He was a trapped son, a romantic soul struggling against an oppressive system. He didn't deceive Jenny out of malice. He did it out of a desperate, all-consuming love that forced him to take extreme measures. This narrative is incredibly effective. It elicits sympathy. It makes the victim of the con feel like they are the rescuer, the only one who truly understands the con artist's plight. Jenny wasn't just his lover. She became his savior, his defender against his cruel family. This dynamic shifted the power balance, making her complicit in protecting him from the consequences of his own actions. We saw it time and time again. Every time his parents confronted him, every time a new lie was exposed, the narrative would reset. Sumit is the victim, and Jenny is his only protector. Now, apply this exact same psychological blueprint to his new guru scam. The desirable identity is no longer a Western model. It is now a wise, enlightened spiritual guide. This persona is designed to appeal to a different kind of desire. The Western tourist's yearning for authenticity, for meaning, for a connection to something ancient and profound. He presents himself as the gatekeeper to this hidden world, a friendly and non-threatening figure who can translate the mysteries of the East. He listens with performative empathy, creating an instant, powerful bond with his emotionally vulnerable clients, just as he did with Jenny online. He love-bombs them with spiritual-sounding affirmations and a sense of deep understanding. And then when it comes time to offer advice, he deploys the second part of the playbook, the victim story. As we saw in the undercover session and in Deborah's testimony, he weaves his own life struggles into his counseling. His deceptions become karmic lessons. His family conflicts become tests of detachment. He presents himself as a fellow sufferer, a spiritual warrior who has endured great trials. This creates a false equivalency. He tells a grieving widow that his struggle with his disapproving parents is akin to her struggle of losing her husband and her family. By doing this, he not only gains her sympathy, but also positions his own questionable solutions as universally applicable spiritual laws. He is not a con artist selling bad advice. He is a fellow victim sharing the hard-won wisdom that saved him. It is a brilliant and deeply cynical manipulation. The pattern is identical. The only thing that has changed is the costume. Let's deconstruct the specific techniques being employed in these counseling sessions, because they are textbook examples of pseudo-spiritual malpractice. First is the weaponization of spiritual jargon. Words like karma, dharma, attachment, and chakras have precise and complex meanings within their original contexts. In the hands of a charlatan, they become meaningless buzzwords, deployed to intimidate the client and create a veneer of authority. When Sumit tells a client they must let go of attachment, he is not guiding them through a complex Buddhist or Hindu philosophical practice. He is using a loaded term to mean, stop caring about your problems. When he tells Deborah her family conflict is her children's karma, he is using it as a justification for inaction and emotional abandonment. It's a way to sound profound while saying nothing of substance, and it places the entire burden of success or failure on the client. If they fail to detach, it is their spiritual failing, not the guru's. Second is the principle of non-falsifiability. The advice he gives can never be proven wrong. If he tells you the universe has a plan and something bad happens, that's part of the plan. If something good happens, that's also part of the plan. If he tells you the answers are within you and you can't find them, it's because you aren't looking hard enough. This creates a closed logical loop from which the client cannot escape. It protects the guru from any accountability. A real counselor or therapist offers concrete strategies and tools, and if those tools don't work, they try a different approach. A charlatan offers untestable, unfalsifiable pronouncements. It's a game that is rigged from the start. Third, and perhaps most insidiously, is the isolation tactic. This is a classic technique used in high-control groups and cults. We saw it in its most brutal form in the advice he gave to Deborah: cut ties with those who have negative energy. In this case, her own children. By advising his clients to detach from their existing support systems, family, friends who might be skeptical, the guru makes the client more and more dependent on him. He becomes their primary source of emotional and spiritual guidance. Their world shrinks until he is at the center of it. He isolates his victims to increase his control. He didn't just stumble upon this technique, it is the very story of his relationship with Jenny. He isolated her from her country, her family, and her financial security, making her almost entirely dependent on him in a foreign land. He is now, allegedly, productizing that very same method of control and selling it for cash. This leads us to the unavoidable and uncomfortable question: what is Jenny's role in all of this? Is she an unwitting accomplice, blinded by love and denial? Or is she a knowing participant in this scam? Let's explore both theories, as insiders themselves seem to be divided. Theory A, the more charitable view, is that Jenny is once again a victim. She sees a husband who is finally trying to build something for himself. After years of being directionless and financially dependent, he's found a career. She sees him reading books on philosophy. She sees him practicing yoga, and she mistakes his performance for genuine transformation. She wants to believe he has changed, that he has matured. Her entire life is invested in the success of their relationship, and his success is her success. She might hear the platitudes he practices and think they sound wise because she is not a theologian or a philosopher. She might see the cash he brings home and feel a sense of relief, a lessening of the financial anxiety that has haunted them for years, without questioning its source too deeply. In this version of events, she is the loyal wife, standing by her man, willfully ignoring the red flags because the alternative, admitting that her husband is a fraud and her entire life in India is built on a lie, is simply too catastrophic to contemplate. She is the ultimate enabler, the codependent partner who smooths over the rough edges and makes excuses because the truth is unbearable. However, there is a second, much darker theory. Theory B posits that Jenny is a willing and active participant. Consider the facts. They are a team. They have faced the world together for a decade. They have managed their finances, their public image, and their television narrative as a unit. Is it plausible that Sumit could set up a website, rent an office, and begin taking clients for cash without her knowledge? It seems unlikely. This theory suggests that this is a joint venture, a calculated business decision made by two people who see their reality TV fame dwindling and are desperate for a new source of income. Perhaps Jenny, with her better command of English and her understanding of the Western mindset, even helps craft the website's language or the email responses to potential clients. Perhaps she is the one who suggested this path in the first place, seeing a market of lonely, spiritually curious Western women just like her, and recognizing that her husband, the exotic Indian man, was the perfect product to sell to them. In this scenario, her on-screen persona as the slightly naive, long-suffering romantic is just as much of a performance as Sumit's guru act. It would be a truly cynical turn, suggesting that their entire story has been less about love and more about a shared interest in survival and fame. It would mean that they are not just deceiving clients, but that they have been deceiving the audience and TLC for years. They are not just partners in life, they are partners in crime. The truth may lie somewhere in between, but either way, the situation is damning. Whether she is a fool or a felon, the outcome is the same. Vulnerable people are being harmed, and their joint enterprise is the cause. The financial desperation that has been a theme throughout their story seems to be the motivating factor. They have tasted a certain lifestyle, a certain level of recognition, and they are not willing to let it go. If the TV show can't provide it, they will find another way. And they have found the perfect loophole. Spiritual guidance is an unregulated industry. There are no licenses required, no oversight boards, no accountability. It is a grifter's paradise, and Sumit has, according to these reports, walked right in and set up shop. This brings us to the reckoning. The undercover investigation, led by the journalist we've called Sarah, was not just an academic exercise. It was compiled into a detailed, explosive exposé, complete with transcripts of the plagiarized advice, audio of the invented proverbs, a full account of the demand for untraceable cash, and the heartbreaking, on-the-record testimony of Deborah. The article was published by a reputable online magazine known for long-form investigative journalism. The fallout, according to sources who have been tracking the story, was immediate and catastrophic for Sumit's carefully constructed new identity. The story ripped through the 90-Day Fiancé fan community like a wildfire. Social media platforms, from Reddit to Instagram to Facebook groups, were flooded with links to the article. For many viewers, it was a moment of grim validation. Every doubt they ever had about Sumit, every red flag they had clocked over the years, suddenly clicked into place. The Michael Jones catfish, the secret wife, the endless excuses, it was all part of the same continuum of deceit. He hadn't changed. He had just escalated. The comments were brutal. He was labeled a predator, a charlatan, a disgrace. The hashtag @GuruScam began to trend, attached to clips from the show where he was caught in a lie, now recontextualized as proof of his fundamentally deceptive character. The mainstream media, which usually treats reality TV with a certain detached amusement, picked up the story. The angle was too compelling to ignore. Reality star accused of exploiting vulnerable tourists in spiritual scam. It had all the elements of a great scandal: fame, deception, money, and the exploitation of a sacred culture. This wasn't just gossip for fan forums anymore. It was a legitimate news story about fraud and emotional abuse. This exposure on a wider scale meant that the damage could not be contained within the bubble of the show's audience. What about TLC, the network that created him? A source close to production stated that the network went into immediate damage control. The allegations were a public relations nightmare. While the show thrives on drama, there is a line. Accusations of systematic, predatory fraud that causes real-world harm to vulnerable people cross that line. The network, which had been profiting from the East meets West romance narrative, was now faced with the ugliest possible manifestation of that dynamic: a star from the East allegedly conning people from the West by selling a fake version of his own culture. Any plans for Sumit and Jenny to appear on future seasons or spin-offs were, according to The Insider, immediately put on indefinite hold. Their brand had become toxic. They were no longer a quirky, lovable couple. They were a liability. And what of Sumit and Jenny themselves? Their reaction was predictable to anyone who has followed their story. First, there was silence. Their social media went dark. Then, as the pressure mounted, they released a carefully managed response. It was not a press release or a formal statement. It was a poorly lit, emotionally charged video filmed on a smartphone from their living room. In the video, Sumit, with Jenny by his side looking tearful and defiant, played his greatest hit, the victim card. He claimed he was the target of a vicious smear campaign. He said the journalist had an agenda, that she had twisted his words and taken his spiritual guidance out of context. He denied ever demanding cash, claiming any money he received was a voluntary donation or energetic exchange. He painted Deborah not as a victim, but as a troubled woman who was trying to blame him for her pre-existing family problems. He never addressed the plagiarism directly, instead saying that all wisdom is universal and that he was simply sharing timeless truths. It was a masterclass in deflection, denial, and gaslighting. He took no responsibility, he admitted no wrongdoing. He was, once again, the poor misunderstood man being persecuted by a cruel world that simply didn't understand his pure intentions. Jenny, for her part, played the role of the loyal defender, stroking his arm and glaring at the camera, telling the world that her husband has a beautiful soul and that these are all lies spread by jealous people. But this time, it didn't work. The evidence was too specific, too detailed. The audio recordings and transcripts were undeniable. Deborah's testimony was too powerful and heartbreaking to be dismissed as the rantings of a troubled woman. The public, armed with the facts of the investigation, saw right through the performance. The video was ratioed into oblivion, with comments overwhelmingly siding with the victims and calling him out for his crocodile tears. His credibility was not just damaged, it was utterly annihilated. The spiritual guru brand, which was his last best hope for a legitimate post-TLC career, was destroyed before it ever truly began. He had flown too close to the sun on wings made of lies, and they had melted. This story is a tragedy on multiple levels. It is a tragedy for the people who were allegedly defrauded of their money and, more importantly, their trust. It is a tragedy for people like Deborah, whose lives were made demonstrably worse by his dangerous and self-serving advice. It is a tragedy for the genuine spiritual teachers and guides in India, whose work is devalued and disrespected by charlatans like this. And in a strange way, it is a tragedy for Sumit himself, a man so seemingly trapped in a cycle of deception that he is incapable of building an honest life. He has spent so long wearing masks that he may no longer know who he is without one. The final picture is a chilling one. A man who built his fame on a lie has leveraged that fame to build a business on a lie. He has monetized his own pathology. From catfish to guru, the scam is the same, only the product has changed. He used a fake identity to sell a fantasy of love to a lonely woman. Now he is using a fake identity to sell a fantasy of enlightenment to lonely tourists. Is this his most cynical move yet? It is a question that hangs heavy in the air. This story serves as a stark warning. A warning about the dangers of parasocial relationships, about placing faith in television personalities, and about the dark side of spiritual tourism. It is a reminder that predators can come in many forms, sometimes with a gentle smile and a seemingly kind heart. The investigation has exposed him, but the work is not done. Share this video, share the story. Warn potential victims before they too fall prey to this guru scam.